So the Saudis thought that would happen, and then it didn't happen because, as far as I understand it, Mullah Omar reneged on it.
But if Mullah Omar had not reneged on this, you think the Saudis were prepared to get Osama at that point?
You know, you'll have to ask a Saudi about that. I mean, I don't know.
Because
I've never been in Saudi Arabia.
The reason I ask this is because there are other reports which say that Saudis were probably, at that point, they wouldn't have touched him with a barge pole.
I heard that too, and maybe that was true later or earlier, but at one point I know this intelligence chief asked for him back. And who knows how they would have handled it, because he was from a pretty prominent family. They might, I don't know what they would have done with him.
Okay, more on this, Bill. We've got to take a short break. But I'm going to ask you about what the Pakistanis were doing at that point in time, or what you, as in the U.S. Embassy and the United States administration, thought the Pakistanis were doing. But all of that after a short break. सियासियात में खुश आमदेद। हम बात कर रहे हैं साबिक अमरीकी सफ़ीर विलियम बी माइलम से। Bill, as I said, I'm going to ask you what the U.S. Embassy and the administration at that point thought the Pakistanis were doing.
Well, you know, this was 1998, 1999, going into 2000, so it's well before 9/11. It was a different world there then in many ways, certainly in Pakistan for me. But we were pretty sure, and I think we had a fair amount of evidence, that the Taliban, who were still gaining ground, they hadn't actually conquered Afghanistan, and they never did really. They got Ahmad Shah Massoud cornered up in the Panjshir, but they never actually took it. But we were always quite amused that when the Taliban would fight a battle against their enemies, Northern Alliance and whoever else, the first day they would look pretty ragged, and the second day they looked like George Patton had all of a sudden taken over. So there was something going on, and we suspected that they were getting help. And of course they got weapons and other things, and we knew this. We knew that they had a relationship with the ISI. So you know, it wasn't any great mystery. It wasn't any great mystery.
Was there a sense of frustration given because when this policy started in '94, in many ways, the United States was on board in the sense that, well, you know, they let the Pakistanis take the lead and thought that perhaps this is going to go somewhere. Then, of course, there was the entire issue of the gas pipeline from Turkmenistan, and UNOCAL was involved in that. But ultimately, the Americans kind of got off the bandwagon. But after that, there was a divergence. By the time you were ambassador, and given all these other developments, you think there was a sense of frustration in the United States about the kind of divergence between what the U.S. wanted and what the Pakistanis were doing?
Well, I mean, that sense of frustration extended to more than the Taliban. I mean, we didn't want them to make the nuclear tests. They did it. We didn't. There's a whole lot of things we would have preferred they not do. So aiding the Taliban was just one of them. When I say the world was greatly different in those days, I mean it, because I came to a position, ambassador in a country with which we didn't have really good relations. Our relations were very strained because of the Pressler Amendment and all the other sanctions that had been put on over the previous 5, 6 years, 7 years, and then the tests and the increased sanctions. And I think we got so worried about it, but you know, down deep there was always a core of knowledge that we needed Pakistan to be a stable country and not to sort of go off the edge of insolvency. So we did at one point, right after, not too long after I got here, the question came up about an IMF program because the country was going bankrupt because of the sanctions, and in fact I think we waved it through. But yeah, there was always, and I had myself a personal sense of frustration because it seemed to me that that there was a congruence of interests here that both sides, maybe both sides, but certainly the Pakistani side weren't recognizing. And I tried to talk to both the Nawaz Sharif and his government, but then certainly later the Musharraf government, about what I thought their interest should be in. And they probably thought it was none of my business, but in any case, we always thought that we ought to at least mention that their interest might be better served by backing off from the Taliban, but they didn't see it that way. But let me, Ejaz, I'm going to go on for a moment because I think your version of history is slightly apocryphal in the sense that we never really supported the Taliban. There were a couple of Americans who made some public statements very early on in '94 that maybe this group was going to stabilize the situation. But very early on, quite clearly, we understood their social philosophy. And I think we found that supporting that kind of philosophy would not have done us well domestically in the United States, among other things. So we were never really supportive of the Taliban in any way, and I think that that was proved to be correct later on, the way with the regime they ran when they took Kabul and so forth. But so, you know, there's a lot of misinformation. In fact, I just came from Bangladesh and did some public meetings there, and people are still saying that we created the Taliban. Well, we had nothing to do with creating the Taliban. And we didn't even know who they were. And in those early months when a couple of our middle-level officers spoke that maybe they were the solution, not the problem, I think that nobody knew who they were, what they were up to. And then as we learned, it became, and this was even before bin Laden came back, that we decided that this was not the solution. It was going to be the problem.
Well, I did not say that the United States created the Taliban.
No, I know you didn't know.
In fact, you know, as the apocrypha of history go, even we did not create them, despite what Major General Nasirullah Baba says. The fact is that this was a force that was coming up. But when I refer to the fact that the U.S. at one time was on board, was in the initial period from '94 to '96 before they took over Kabul. But then, of course, in '97, when Madeleine Albright became the U.S. Secretary of State, there was a clear divergence, and that Emma Bonino incident was one incident that, you know, got everyone to sort of look at the Taliban.
And there was the massacre of the Hazaras and all kinds of things that really. If we ever had a question mark, it was certainly turned off.
But going back to the U.S.-Pakistan thing, now that you look back and you have been a practitioner, a foreign service officer who's held ambassadorial positions, and you are now a scholar, having written a book, you know, and looking at it both in terms of theory as well as praxis. When you look back, do you think that there was a lack of an incentive structure, and that if there was a better incentive structure that the U.S. could have offered Pakistan, that Pakistan would have reacted differently?